So let's begin with our tutorial in Vega-lite and maybe doing some recap for Vega-lite. Before we begin, I added some libraries and things that I wanted to use in this tutorial at the very beginning. So first of all, we need to definitely add import D3 as a library. We used to do that with require function, and then we need to import Vega-lite. We are using Vega-lite embedded Vega-lite to, let me show you, we are using embedded Vega-lite because it brings us a convenience wrapper for Vega space, and this also has some like embedded code that otherwise we had to write them ourselves. Anyways, just for a recap, what Vega-lite was a high-level grammar that provided you with an interactive graphics and JSON syntax so that you could support the rapid generation, interactive, and multiple views of your visualization. And so it's like a declaring format for describing different types of data visualization. For today's session, we're going to use a weather dataset. Let me show you the link. You can find the link here, but it's Seattle weather, and in this dataset we have temperature, minimum and maximum of the temperature, wind, and the weather in different times of the year, different dates of the year in Seattle. And later you can see that I'm going to use two different functions, range slider and menu. So this I'm gonna import it here, but you will see the usage later. Okay, so let's begin with Vega-lite, and let's make a simple bar chart, and we want to look at the number of days in which each of these type of record happened. So you can simply do that by like this. So we start with the Vega-lite, and then we specify what data we are using. Mark specifies what types of diagram we are using. So here we are using bar chart. It can be point, it can be line, and so on. And for a basic chart, we just need to define the encoding for X and Y. So we can also define different encodings. We will see some of them today later to this workshop. So I want to get the field of weather, and which the type is nominal, and I want to like count the number of rows for each weather. So the field is so we are using the aggregate function for count, and that value would be quantitative. Okay, so let's begin with the first extra mapping in like argument or modification mapping for Vega-lite. Let's add some color to the bar chart we made. So I'm gonna copy this one. Okay, so to add a color to the graph or to the bar chart we are making here, I'm using color tag for inside the encoding, and here we need to specify what color to be like, what is the field we want to change the color based on. So first we need to specify the field. I'm going to specify it as weather, and then we need to say what type is that field. So usually when you bring the field, you need to bring the type as well. Otherwise, Vega-lite consider it as nominal by default, which might be wrong. And before going further, I just wanted to remind you that when you're importing your data set, it's important to use this D3 autotype. Remember, in the previous session we went through each of the columns. We had a for loop and we were casting each of those string column to integer, because that way we wouldn't be able to, otherwise we wouldn't be able to use most of the functions on them. For example, like it would return wrong answer for min and max functions. So in order to prevent that, it's good to use d3.autotype. Anyway, get back to the color. Okay, oh, now I have the color. So what happens here is we are using this quantitative variable. We are using this variable as a color, and Vega-lite will assign a default scale or schema, as we say in Vega-lite terms, to map the value for each of these colors to the value of our data. So you can, we can learn more about these color palettes or color schema in the link I provided here. So you see that based on the type of the data you're using, you can find different color scales. For example, for the ordinal, the default is blue, or for the categorical, the default is this one. Okay, so what if we want to have some color with scale? So you remember that we when we were using Tableau, we had this scale, bar scale for color. You might want to implement such a thing later in your code for your project. So for that, you need to, let me again copy this one. For that, you need to add a scale type here. So scale argument. So I'm gonna add scale, and this scale I'm gonna use specific schema. Scheme plasma. Okay, so yeah, so here we use a range of color instead of a single color. And then again, you can change what you want to make this color based on. For example, we can add an aggregate function and put this aggregate as, for example, the mean of precipitation. So let's change the, or we can set it mean of temperature. Something easier. Interesting. Oh, it's because the type is 1. Voila. So it's gonna use the color like for aggregate, so it gets the aggregate of the maximum of the temperature for my data, and because the type is quantitative, it's gonna put this range scale, and it's kind of an obvious, because in sunny days the temperature is higher than in snowy days. Temperature is going to be lower, the lowest, but so using this scale let you choose the scale, and if you use the quantitative data, it's going to give you a scale bar like this, like what we have here. Okay, so let's make another bar chart for maximum this side. Okay, so instead of aggregate count, I'm gonna put maximum, and so the type would be quantitative. The field, I'm gonna get the maximum of, for example, wind, the maximum wind speed, and okay, so here you are. Now you remember that in Tableau, when we were working with data, we could sort them easily. So in order to sort your data in Vega-lite, you can use this sorting value. So I'm gonna show you. Okay, so here we put the argument sort, and then we set the scale if you want to have it descending or ascending. Okay, so I'm gonna sort my data, and I'm gonna do it descending. Interesting, but it's better too. So let's change the x and y place. Makes it x and makes this one y. So it kind of makes better sense. Okay. So weather is related to season, and let's take a look at what happens when we explore looking for data for each month instead of like data for weather and the maximum of wind. So again, copying and pasting the base code, and here I'm gonna, so it's, instead of we need to change these two fields because we want to get data for the month and the number of like each of the different kinds of weather for each month. So I'm gonna use x as a time unit. So if you remember, in our data sets we had, oh no, this was not the data, this was. So in data set we have the date in format of like a date format, but you want to separate them based on what month they were in. So we need to use the time unit to specify, okay, from this date scale I want to specify months. So the time unit would be month, and I'm gonna use date field, and then the type of that field is ordinal. Okay, and then for my y-axis I'm going to aggregate the number of each of the, like the number of values, and then I'm gonna separate them based on the weather. So this way I would have like a stacked bar chart with different kinds of weather and with the general value of like the count of those records for each month. Okay, so aggregate would be count. As I said, I'm looking for the count of those weathers, and the field would be star because I'm going to count the rows, and the type is quantitative. Then I'm going to specify the color, and let's see how it goes. Oh, I see. Voila. So we have this stacked bar chart, which is interesting, but so we can start to pick out some interesting seasonal patterns from here, from this visualization. And let's take a look at how to make a line chart out of it. So instead of bar chart, we can generate a line chart. Okay. So the type would be, we can also specify this as like, I'm going to use type as a line chart, or you can just leave it as a line value. And then so we have a kind of pattern for different types of weather in each season, in each month. However, what is the, I don't know, what is the temperature maybe for each of these months? So let's count the number of temperature max, and by count, so we're working with temperature, so it's better to get the mean of that value. And yeah, so here is the changes in the temperature for each of these types of weather during the month, which is kind of cool, but it's continuous, and there are no values to show that it did not snow in the summer like what we have here. So during the summer we have this line for sunny weather, like snowy weathers, but we know that we don't have any snow. So we can instead make what if we take an individual points, we can instead we can make a scatter plot for that, and use each of the points and see the trend of our value. Okay, so instead of line, I'm going to use point, and let's keep the rest the same. That's weird. Oh, okay. So instead of like this shows us the aggregation of the mean of the temperature for each month. But what do we want to see? The whole data. Let's see the whole data for temperature. Okay, so this is for each month, and you can see that there's a range of maximum temperature from daytime to nighttime. But what if we could separate them based on not only month but also date? So we have another value named month date that shows you the whole thing based on the both month and date. Then because it's like too long, instead of putting this at ordinal, we can put it temporal. So just wrap everything in a smaller chart, and then, well, in the previous one it was much easier to see everything, but we had to scroll. So what if we just scale it instead of scrolling? So let's make it bigger to be able to see what's happening there. So in order to do that, in order to change the size of your graph, you need to use width, so let's put it as 105 of the graph as 400 maybe. Okay, so this is much better. And instead of point, I can put circle, so there will be points with filled like this. I think this kind of gives us a pretty graph. Let's make it a bit smaller, 700, 600. Sounds neat. Okay, so we made this graph, and in the next section we are going to apply some of the basic interactions that was like when you were using Tableau. You could easily hover over the points, you could select them, you could see data from them. And so what we are going to do is to learn how to make such features for your visualization.